Good evening, everybody. My name is Mary Ellen Yep, and I'm the Program Director here at Yuma Center, where we inspire women to impact generations. Thank you for joining us tonight. We are reaching you from the hill to the home. We are so enamored with this program's 60s and Beyond series for women because younger generations have so much to learn from you, especially in tonight's event where we're going to speak about wise women, smart money, how to plan your future. So tonight we have 15 different states represented in the participants today. And we actually have a participant tuning in from Canada as well. So thank you everyone for joining in. Before we begin and before I introduce tonight's host, I'm going to send you a poll. Now this poll is to assess your financial knowledge. So right now, if you look at your screen, there's a question that just went out. Which one of these applies to your financial knowledge? A, I pay my bills. B, I contribute to a retirement plan, etc. C, my spouse and I have met with professionals, but I don't participate. D, my spouse and or I work together on bills, strategy, estate planning, contributions, etc. I'm well versed. Or D, plan? What plan? So I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to fill that out, and then I'm going to publish the results just to see as an audience where we all stand. I'll give about 10 more seconds just to see if anyone else wants to fill it out. A few more coming in. All right, I'm going to end the polling and I'm going to share the results. So 41% of the audience says that they pay their bills. 18% say they contribute to a retirement plan. 5% say my spouse and I have met with professionals, but I don't participate. 32% say my spouse and or I work together on bills, strategy, estate planning, contributions, etc. I'm well versed. And 1% said plan, what, sorry, excuse me, 5% said plan, what plan? Thank you for being vulnerable and telling us what your financial assessment is. And without further ado, I want to introduce our host for tonight. Her name is Brenda Royden. She is a beloved board member of Yuma Center who led the launch of this program in January 2019 with Helena Metzger. Brenda has been a pioneer for Yuma Center's growth and has participated in all levels of Yuma's expansion. We are so grateful for you, Brenda. And without further ado, take it away.
Well, thank you so much, Mary Ellen. Such a nice introduction. And welcome to all of you wise women who signed up for our 60s and Beyond seminar. Wise women, smart money, plan for your future. Wow, it's a great topic, right? We're so glad you're here. For all those who are new to Yuma Center, we started this series for women 60 and beyond last year. Women our age are looking for ways to grow personally, professionally, spiritually at this new stage in our lives. In our series, we've spoken about areas that affect us as women, including beginning again, and sometimes, okay, most days, beginning again and again, friendship, decluttering our homes, the outer you, fashion, and how you present yourself to the world, creativity in our daily lives, using opera as a learning tool, living your best self now. We also spoke about leaving a legacy in terms of memories and recording our history. This evening, we're going to talk about planning for your future, including leaving a will. You may have heard the story about the man who tries to get into heaven carrying a big heavy bag, and St. Peter asks him, well, what's in it? And he replies, gold. And St. Peter says, well, why did you bring pavement stone with you? So Kim Herman, our presenter, has an impressive resume that we shared with you in an email and at our website. Highlights include Kimberly has been in the corporate, financial, and financial services industry for over 30 years, beginning her career in the late 70s in mortgage banking. She was recruited after many different job iterations, right, Kim? You can speak about those. She was recruited by Smith Barney, where her primary focus was working with families, corporate executives, and business owners until 2003. Kim recognized the need for objective, comprehensive advice and planning and started her own practice as an independent investment advisor representative with LPL Financial, where she has worked for the past 17 years. Outside the office, Kim has also found great success in many pursuits, including serving on the board of the Heights School in Potomac, Maryland, and the Yuma Center. She and her husband, Scott, have 4 children, 3 grandchildren, and live in Bethesda, Maryland. Kim, we're so grateful that you could join us this evening and really share with us the valuable information that you've learned over the years. Without further ado, Kim Herman.
Good evening, everyone. It's so nice to be able to talk with you tonight. I love giving financial seminars for women because women ask questions. And so tonight I'm going to talk just briefly in a broad way. Just the questionnaire told me that the level of expertise is varied. So I'm going to talk broad. And then we're going to open up for questions because there's a way you can ask them anonymously, and then you can ask personal questions too, because we won't know who you are. So anyway, I'm going to start just brief, and then we're going to go to the questions. Just to give a little bit more explanation of our business, we have 2 sides to the business. We do financial planning, extensive financial planning, and we also do investments. I'd say the lion's share of our clients do both, but sometimes people just want financial plans, sometimes they just want investing. But that just gives you an example. I'm a mother-daughter team. My daughter, who was a naval officer for 5 years, got out of the Navy, and now she's telling me what to do. She's been with me for 5 years, and she's our COO, the Chief Operations Officer. We also have 2 assistants, Andrea and Natalia. So first I wanted to share with you a few statistics. Women more than men say that their number 1 source of stress is money. Also, historically, finance has been the number 1 reason for divorce in this country. Shocking considering we're one of the wealthiest countries in the world, but that is a statistic. Also, women that end up managing their own money often keep 71% on average of their assets in cash. So another interesting statistic is that the greatest wealth transfer will be happening they're expecting to happen in the next decade or 2, and where women are going to be the biggest beneficiary. So they're talking about $30 trillion of assets moving into the hands of the women. So you can see why it's really important to be educated in this topic, and why it's very important to get yourself involved. Statistically, women don't tend to get involved. Now I get it, when you're a married woman with children, you have, there's a natural separation of duties, but the problem is I've spent my career trying to get women involved in this process. And the reason is that, again, women don't want to be involved. And so I can tell you a number of horror stories. And I will tell you a couple of examples as we go on. But so we've tried to educate women and couples to run their homes like they'd run a company. So if you were to buy a business, McDonald's, anything, you were going to make shoes, you would want to know what those books look like every month. You want to see what your sales were, what your expenses were. Are you making any money ahead or behind? Running a home is the exact same thing. So what you want to do is, we've come up with a plan that we've worked with many, many couples that has worked in the last 24 years. I've been in personal finance. Before that, We said 30 years, but if you did the math, it's more like 40 some. But so we don't want to scare anybody, right? But anyway, before that, I was in corporate finance. But anyway, I think the thing is that all these years, this plan works. And that is, if you create a budget's absolutely necessary, and you track it, you meet on the third week of the month, and you sit down with your spouse and you go over the numbers, and you can see whether you're in and out on that budget. The last then part of the month, you decide not to buy groceries, you eat out of the cupboard or whatever. The point is you know exactly where every dollar is going. Once you know that and you sit down with your spouse, make it a date night, get a bottle of wine. Whatever works, we say the third week of the month, because on the fourth week, you can change your habits. So then after you know what you've done month after month after month, you suddenly amass, and it's amazing how much freedom you have and how much money you now have to work with. This doesn't actually matter how much money you make. So it's surprising. You can make $1 million a year, you can make $100,000 a year, you can make $25,000 a year. It doesn't matter, but you need a budget. So then the more you have a budget, the more you track your expenses, the more you know where you're going. If I could not get anything else across tonight, that would be the biggest message I would like to get across. Run your home like you'd run a business, as if you own this business. You do own this business. So run it like you run a company. There was an interesting saying that says, the person who doesn't know where his next dollar is coming from usually doesn't know where his last dollar went. So again, track your budget, stay with it. And there's so many apps out there. Our financial plan has an app that also comes with it, but there's so many free ones. You can do Mint Money. There's so many of them that you can use. You just have to make sure you stay on it. It's an hour a month once you set it up. Just set that appointment with yourself and get that going. Then after you're doing your planning, every stage of your life is moving at a different pace. Once you have little kids, then you're saving for tuitions, and then you have, the tuitions, whether it's high school or lower school, then you've got college tuitions. But since we're talking to seniors tonight, I'm going to focus a little bit more on the age group that's moving into retirement, which is 50s, 60s, and above. If you haven't done so already, and I suspect a lot of people have, is to contribute to if you're working for a company, contribute to your 401k. Now, you can contribute to a maximum of $26,000 this year, and it's a dollar for dollar reduction in your taxes. So this is a huge paycheck to yourself, because not only are you getting tax deferred growth, which is compounding, which we all learned in the 5th or 6th grade about, the 5 cents you add under the $100, and then, next year is 105 plus 5. It's the same idea. You get that over a long period of time, and you actually have a big pot of money. If you started at 60, which may seem late, and you say, oh, it's too late, it's not true, because mandatory distributions now after the Secure Act are now not until 72. They were at 70 and a half, now they're at 72. You have 12 years to save. So also another interesting thing is we don't have very many clients actually retiring. So what they're doing is they're taking their, maybe going to 30 hours a week or 20 hours a week, but we have quite a few people we know that are actually working into their 70s. And statistically, that's what's happening right now. I think one of the drivers of that is is the college tuitions that everybody's paying so much for. And the parents are contributing and really paying a lot for. That's keeping them working longer. So, and also it kept them from saving money into their 401k. So just get on it. I mean, start at $25 a month if you have to, with the percentage of growth. It's best to just get moving on that. And everybody works out of their net. So, it comes right out of your paycheck. You don't see it. You'll get used to what's coming out of your paycheck. Start this early. Tell your children and your grandchildren, start this early. Get them into, my 18-year-old started contributing to his Roth to his Roth IRA. And he has quite a bit of money now that he's 27. So it works. It actually does work. So the other thing I wanted to also say is that you can contribute to your regular 401k as well as an IRA. You don't get the write-off on your IRA, but you do get the tax deferred growth. So if you can afford to do both, do both. The Roth IRA, if you're in the incomes requirements for that, is a great strategy to do. You can do your 401k on the one side and the Roth on the other side. Those are a couple things that you can do. Now I'm just going to move quickly through these topics, but again, we can open up the questions. Long-term care. I've had a number of clients say to me, by the time I'm in my 60s, it's too late to buy long-term care. And actually, that's not true. What really matters is whether or not you have good health. So if you have good health and you're 62 years old, you might pay a premium of $3,500 or $33,000 a year. But what's really popular right now is if you have assets, is the hybrid, which is a life insurance policy with a long-term care feature. And if you put in 50, 100,000 into that, if you never use the long-term care feature, you actually it has a death benefit. If you do use the long-term care feature, it'll then, ratchet down until you may or may not have a life insurance at the end. But it's nice to have the combination where regular long-term care is just a premium. So then again, Medicare, I get this question all the time. 3 months before you're 65 and 3 months after you're 65, you have that opportunity to sign up. If you do not sign up, Medicare Part B becomes a 10% penalty for the rest of your life. So that is that sort of 7-month window you want to be signing up for your Medicare. In the case of a working spouse, you do not have to sign up for Medicare, but you can, who has health insurance, you have 8 months after you resign to sign up for Medicare. If he works till 69 or she works till 69, you can sign up for 8 months afterwards. So that's a good pointer to know. Social Security. Most people think that you're taking Social Security at 66. If you were born after 1960, it's actually 67. For every year you wait from 66 to 70, you have an 8% gain in what you're going to receive as income. So for people who are working later or don't need the money, we actually recommend you wait till 70. Now the crossover point is 84. So in other words, if you live past 84, you should have waited until 70. Now, of course, none of us know the answer to that question. So it's kind of we have to be running those numbers constantly to determine whether or not you should wait. But that's a good thing to know. Now we're in our financial plans, we're tracking these financial plans for a lot of people out until their late 90s. So that's a long time to have to, have money last. So that's why it's so important to save. And then I was going to say regarding Social Security, it's very complicated. So I don't have enough time to go into it tonight, but if your spouse takes it at 66 and you're above 62, you can take half of his as well. But so rather than getting a lot of questions on Social Security, the best thing you can do for yourself if you're getting close to this age or you have a spouse that can take it at 66 is to make an appointment with SSA.gov. All of our clients that get an appointment with SSA.gov, have all their questions answered. Then they would come back to me and tell them what they said, and then we can run some numbers. But they are the experts, so definitely check in with them. Then the other thing is estate planning. Now, since we do financial planning, of course, this is a big topic. So the bottom line on this is that in your IRAs and your 401ks, you generally have a beneficiary. You don't need a trust for that. What you do need a trust for is any assets that are outside of those retirement vehicles. So if you don't have a lot of money outside your retirement vehicles and there's just a little bit there, then we say on your accounts, on your non-retirement accounts, you can go TOD, transfer on death, or pay on death, POD, on those accounts so that you don't have to formulate a trust. But then you do have then, of course, if you own real estate, and that's not in the trust, that also means it has to go to probate. Anything not in the trust that's not in a retirement account would have to go to probate, which means you have to be assigned an attorney and go through the whole probate process. Most people don't like going through probate. So, so if you have substantial assets, we recommend you get the trust. The trust also is not a public document. If it goes to probate, it becomes a public document. So in a trust, everything's protected in the trust, and then the trustee, the executor of the trust, is the one that has to disseminate the estate. But now another thing on the whole thing with probate versus trust and your estate plan is the POA, the power of attorney. So the power of attorney is very important for your assets. So whoever you assign to be your power of attorney, it used to be that power of attorneys said that the person that has your power of attorney, when they step in, you're declared incompetent. So it means you can't, you've got Alzheimer's or whatever, you had to be declared by 2 doctors. The modern POA, it just says, you know, if anything's wrong with me, this person's going to be my POA. So let me just tell you a couple of problems with that. So I've been kind of bantering back with one of my attorneys on this. But the thing is once a POA steps in and says, you know, my mother or whatever is incompetent, the financial advice, and then decides to, maybe that they decide to do something in the estate that, or in the investments that you think are too aggressive, or it looks like they're taking too much money out. The financial advisor, we're a fiduciary. So we represent the client. Even with the POA, the first thing we have to do with the POA, if something looks like it's out of whack, we have to call the client. Now, POAs don't like that because they think they're in charge now. But the fact of the matter is you really need to trust that POA. And you need to really question them. If anything happens to me, how would you manage my money? Ask the questions. You're interviewing your POA. It isn't just somebody you assign. So they have a lot of authority. A POA, if it looks like, you know, if they call and say, I'm a POA and we have the document and it's now on file and everything's good to go, and they say, send me 20,000, my mother needs this for healthcare. Well, we send them 20,000. So, you know, so we have the responsibility, but we're also fiduciaries. A new law was passed, the best interest law, the regulation best interest, which went into effect this summer, which is protecting the elderly from abuse. And there's a lot of elder abuse out there. And so this law is to help protect the elderly from being abused for these kinds of things. So we're more than ever on top of a POA that does anything that looks just not quite right for the client. So just an FYI, you know, when you're picking your POA, make sure you've interviewed them and you've talked to them about, if I were to get Alzheimer's, and how would you manage my account, and you know, how would you be working with my financial advisor? And maybe what you would even, I've had clients had me speak with the POA before they've gotten Alzheimer's, so that we have an understanding with each other, you know. So again, it's very important. The POA is a very important person for you. But also to remember too, if you don't have a POA and that our client begins to show signs of problems, it's very hard after the person to get a POA because it's so difficult legally. So it's better to take care of all this stuff ahead of time before anything, you know, you start to have issues or whatever. Make sure you've taken care of this ahead of time in your estate plan. And then this is one really interesting thing that happened with the Secure Act. I don't know if anybody's read about that, but it used to be that when you inherited an IRA, you could take the little piece of it over your lifetime, just like you do your mandatory distributions. But now the new Secure Act, after December of 2019, if you inherit an IRA, you have to take it within 10 years. So, which is a real bummer because most people's assets are in their 401ks or their IRAs. So it's a bummer for the beneficiary. So just a little bit of information on that. If you have a lot of money and you don't need that IRA, you can consider converting that to a Roth. You'll pay taxes on it. You can convert pieces of it over a period of time, so not all in 1 year. And that way, the Roth IRA if the person is a beneficiary of a Roth IRA, they do not have to pay taxes on that over 10 years. If I inherit an IRA and that's $100,000, I have to take all of it in 10 years, and it adds to my taxable income. So, but the Roth IRA does not. So some people are converting their IRAs when they don't think they're really going to need it that much. So because they have a lot of other assets, but really, again, since we're tracking money out to the late 90s, you have to have a lot of money not to use your IRA money. So that's something to consider before you do a Roth conversion. But it's just some information that you might be helpful to know. One little quote I thought was kind of interesting. It says, "When the world changes around you and when it changes against you, what used to be a tailwind is now headwind. You have to lean into that and figure out what to do because complaining isn't a strategy." So we all, again, money's stressful, and there are so many strategies that you can come up with for couples and get on it early that can keep a lot of this, this consternation down in the marital situation. we put together, I just wanted to tell you a quick story. One of our clients lost her husband early, in his early 60s, and she was a professor, didn't have any interest in the money, and figured he was a finance guy, he'd take care of all of it, and he died suddenly in the middle of the night, and she never knew if they had life insurance. She didn't know if they had who he banked with. He did all the bills. She didn't know if he was having financial troubles like he was, and she didn't know the debts that he had incurred. So suddenly she's forced into this situation. I spent 12 days going through every box in his office that looked like, had been a war zone, and helping her to sort this all out. After that, I said, that's it. We've been trying to get people to put together their plans all these years. After that, I said, we're putting together a package. I'm handing it out to every client. I'd be happy to send you one. Just email me at kimberly.herman@lpl.com or kara.friendstead@lpl.com. And it's a package that basically has everything in there. It says, it basically says, where do you want your funeral to be? What kind of flowers you want? It has everything in there. Add your passwords. You can do everything, because the best gift you can give your heirs, your children, and whoever your heirs are, is the fact that they know where everything is. Because when a person passes away and they have never shared that with anybody, or nobody really knows, it is a nightmare. And I'm telling you, that's the last thing you want to deal with when you've lost a loved one. So it's just a package. You fill it all out. You tell your person you trust and your family where it is. And that way, you don't have to hire the geek squad to break into your computer and, whatever else. It's all there, and they know basically everything there is to know: who you bank with, where your assets are, who your financial advisor is, who your attorney is, where the estate plan is, where your will is. Very important to have a will. I didn't talk about that yet. I can't tell you how hard it is to get people to do a will, just a simple will. We're not even talking about an estate plan. A simple will. You die without a will, your estate is called intestate, and it goes to the state. The state decide who that goes to. So you do not want to not have a will. And if you have children, you need to go out tomorrow and get a will. So you absolutely have to have a will. It's one of these things you do for your family that is the best gift you can give them. So with that, I know I'm talking fast, but I wanted to be able to make sure you could you have questions, to answer your questions that you might have, because I could talk all night on these subjects. So anyway, probably to open up for questions.
That was wonderful, Kim. Thank you so much. You did give a lot of information, so I'm sure there will be many questions. So you have the power. We want everyone to know, the participants, to ask questions anonymously, and we will not divulge who is asking the questions, especially if they're personal. So we'll try to get to as many as we can. Just look at the bottom of your screen and you'll see a little Q&A icon, and just click that and type in a question, and we'll try to get to as many as we can, as I said. So let's see how we're doing. So, okay, can you repeat, I think, the address to get the package?
Yeah, it's KIMBERLY.Herman, HERMAN, @LPL.com. You might want to definitely put Kara on there too, because she's would work with our assistants. It's Kara, KARA.Friendsted, FRANSTED, @LPL.com.
And we'll send those 2 emails in a follow-up email tomorrow morning as well, in case no one caught those.
That's great. Thanks, Mary Ellen. Okay, how about, what would you say is the biggest question that people ask you when it comes to planning their estate? What's the major question we should all be concerned about?
Well, I think probably the biggest question when they know they need wills. I mean, most people knows they should have a will. But I'd say the biggest question on estate planning is, do they need a trust? And the trust, it depends on how your assets are, how much you have outside of retirement accounts. how many properties you have. It's easier to have a trust with properties. Again, a trust, everything passes cleanly through a trust, where if it has to go to probate, it used to be that you couldn't probate a car, but now you can. I mean, you couldn't put a car in a trust, but you can actually now put cars in trust. Because if you don't have a car in the trust, that has to go through probate. So let's say you have all your assets in a trust and your car is outside the trust. Now that trust has to go through probate for the person that's deceased. So, yeah, so trusts are easy. I'd say the average cost of a trust is $3,500 and to do everything. Again, if you're depending on how complicated your estate is, it can go up from there. But I'd say that's probably the average cost for a basic trust, will, POA, that sort of thing.
And the trust is done with your attorney.
Yeah, lawyers do the trust.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I would recommend an estate planning lawyer. Sometimes people say, oh yeah, I do estate planning, but they really do corporate law or whatever. You really want somebody, it's complicated estate planning, so you really want somebody who knows estate planning law.
Yes, right. And the will, what should be included in the will?
So everything. So, you have jewelry, you should say, and a lawyer will basically say all assets outside of the, this or that. But you should put everything in the trust. The kids, who you want the kids to go to. Kids, and it should say also, and it can say in the will too, any kids, that I have had after this, in case you don't update it. We recommend updating every 5 years, your wills and estates. But anyway, you should have everything in there: property, children, who you want, if you want your assets to go mostly to your kids, but maybe 10% to a charity or something. All your wishes have to be in the will.
I see. Okay, we have a question. My husband is pretty savvy when it comes to financial matters. How do I convince him that I want to be part of the strategy for our estate plan?
So that gets back to the idea that you're a partnership and you are in business together. So this isn't one party. Of course, one tends to be more knowledgeable than the other, and men traditionally have always taken on this role. But when you see that $30 trillion of assets are passing into the hands of a female and she's not educated in this process, that he needs to get on board with the fact that if anything happens to him, and men tend to die first, so he wants her to be involved. To be aware of what it is that she has to do. And also, it's interesting statistic, 85% of women leave the financial advisor of her husband because he never brought her into the process.
Oh.
So that's an interesting statistic, and that's interesting too, because if you have a guy a man, like your husband, who's been out golfing with his financial advisor, but never ever, and that's where they get all their business done, and never brought you into this process, and then he passes away and you have no idea where everything is, and then the guy starts talking to you, you're sort of angry, that this financial advisor didn't bring you into the process. So it is a tricky business. I know I've worked with obviously many couples over the years, and you can see the tension right away. But of course, our job is to help couples to learn to communicate in this way, so that it's a partnership. And sometimes it becomes a control issue, but the partnership, is really the thing to focus on. I don't know if that answers that question, but it is a process. And I would say get a third party, like a financial advisor, because doing it by yourself is hard.
Yeah. Well, another question came in. What questions should we ask a financial advisor when interviewing for an advisor?
So one thing I think that's very important to ask is that, how proactive are you? And how often will we be reviewed with you? If I call to have a question, is that something that will I be able to get through to you? Sometimes financial advisors, maybe you have a smaller account, and so they may not think you're as important. And I think that happens to a lot of people, thinking, well, they're never going to call me back or whatever. So you want to definitely know how proactive they are. You want to be educated into because most investing now is managed accounts. In other words, we have discretion to manage your money. But you want to know that in that discretion, do they agree with your tolerance for risk? We use a tool called Riskalyze that we've determined every time we have our annual meetings, if that Riskalyze, if you're at the same tolerance for risk you were last year, and we want to make sure we're managing your account to the risk level that you are. So, and that's personal, some people can still be in the growth and income category, but one person's more conservative than the other, even though they're within that range. So you want to know all that stuff. So when you're interviewing them and you want to get a feel from this person gets as they're doing financial planning too, it gets very personal. So you want to feel really comfortable with that person. If you walk away feeling uncomfortable, you do not want to hire them. So I once had, before I was in the personal business, when I was in corporate finance, I went to this advisor, we had been referred to him, and I was asking him questions. And even though I had a financial background, it was corporate finance. But he said to me, well, I kept asking him these various questions, and he said to me, I'm not accustomed to being questioned. And I thought, excuse me? This is my money, and you're not accustomed to being questioned? So needless to say, we didn't take our money to him. But it's that kind of stuff. You don't want that answer. I don't care who he is. It could be, I don't know, but the top guy on Wall Street. It doesn't matter. I want to be able to feel comfortable and heard by him. You know what I mean?
That's great. Yes, I do know what you mean. How about this question? How can I know here? What about the Social Security benefits being cut in 10 years?
Oh yeah, that's a good one. So we're reading articles about this all the time. One of my research said that if Congress doesn't plug the hole, that they're expecting that we should expect 79%. I've heard it say expect as low as 70%.
70% being cut?
No, 30%. So you're going to get 70% or 79% of your money. So the thing is that Social Security was originally designed to cover 40% of your expenses, originally designed for that. So no one should expect Social Security to really cover, the lion's share of their expenses. So I think when you're factoring in your financial plan, you should really be thinking about that. So in fact, you should probably even go to 25%, because especially if it's going to get cut down. So Social Security is kind of like the bonus you're hoping to get every year, That's what I think is a better way to look at Social Security. Biden has on the table, I don't know, he just recently came out with a thing of so that, after 135,000, you don't get, and you get 6.2%, you're no longer taxed on Social Security. But he's talking about anybody over 400,000 would get taxed again. So on Social Security. So that is going to be huge for people in the higher tax bracket if he gets in and goes through.
I see. Okay. A question: how can I make sure my advisor doesn't embezzle my money?
Yeah, I think Bernie Madoff sort of blew it for everybody, right? It's, first of all, everything is running through compliance. So any movement in an account, it would be very difficult to take money out of a client's account without there being a red flag. In the case of somebody like Bernie Madoff, he had his accountant in on his, so he was an RIA, an independent registered investment advisor. So he was clearing his own, through a clearinghouse, his own stock, and his accountant was in on it with him. So the accountant was fudging the numbers. So in that case, they're all over those guys now. Now, somebody like us who's clearing through a broker dealer, so I have my own company, but we're clearing through a broker dealer where another whole arm of compliance is watching my trades. Mm-hmm. So it's very difficult to embezzle money. And when you read these articles, I was reading one the other day about a guy down in, I think it was Florida, was selling CDs to the elderly. CDs, he was selling CDs, working on his own that he didn't even have access to. I don't even know how he did it, but again, he wasn't backed by a big firm. Like LPL Financial is the largest independent broker dealer in the country. So you have to really look at that. Who are they being backed by? Who are they clearing through? That sort of thing. But in general, it's difficult. It would be difficult to take anybody's money out of the account.
Okay. Do you recommend free online programs for writing a will?
We don't. Sometimes I've told my young kids, they're not going to pay $3,500 for a will, So, I know, what's it, Zoom, I know they have different things online. I think it's okay for people who don't have assets and kids and everything else, but we really don't recommend it because of the changes in the law. And they don't always pick up the changes in the law all the time. And so, you can get caught that way. And I've heard, I've read some horror stories on that. So we don't really recommend it. I mean, for somebody who's 21 or 2 that has a Robinhood account, for a few thousand or whatever, and, that's okay. But honestly, we really recommend you go through a professional.
Right, to cover all your bases.
Yeah. And state law, because all the state laws are different.
Now, this woman asks, I understand that you don't need a trust for assets owned jointly with a spouse. Is this correct?
No, that's not correct. So in the case of a non-retirement account owned jointly, so you're thinking that the trust would come in when both pass away. So you don't need a trust when it's moving from one spouse to the other. But the issue is not really when the spousal thing is in a joint account. Yes, absolutely, it goes from one to the other. That's a joint account. But in the case of when they both go, is when that trust it goes into an action. So you don't know if you're going to go together or separately or whatever. That's where the trust comes in. So then you put everything in trust, and if it happens to be that God willing, you go separately, then the trust kicks in after he or she passed away, and then the final spouse the trust is covering all the assets for the heirs.
Okay. Can you please repeat what you said? Let's see, about a life insurance policy with a long-term care option versus just long-term care.
So long-term care insurance, if you just like any other insurance policy, has a premium annually or monthly or however you want to pay it. And there's no control over how much they raise those every year. So the insurance company they for a period of time, they really got bad rap because they were raising them very fast because they didn't do the algorithms right because people were using them all the time and they were losing so much money. So then they suddenly started getting more expensive. So that's a premium, like you pay for your auto insurance and your house insurance, there's a premium, and it can go up every year. In the case of the long-term care with the life insurance, you pay one set fee. Say you pay $50,000 for the life insurance policy. It also has a long-term care feature that grows in how much every year you can use in long-term care. So if you buy at 60 and at 80, now you have a pot of $330,000 to use for your long-term care. And but if you never use it, you've got the life insurance policy. So it's really popular now because people don't like those rising premiums. If you're paying long-term care premiums until you're 80, 90 years old, it gets to be pretty hefty,
Yes.
So,
yes. Do you recommend budget software to track expenses such as
absolutely.
QuickBooks?
QuickBooks is awesome because you can use that for your business. But absolutely, yeah, definitely. Any kind of software that you feel comfortable with that can, you can live feed all of your accounts to, and that where you can monthly, set the, the allocations and everything. Those are great. I mean, QuickBooks is wonderful. Quicken, Mint Money's free, but sometimes the young people use Mint Money quite a bit.
Yes. Okay. Do you have to have $1 million worth of assets to get a trust? What's minimum assets to have to get a trust?
So
what are the minimum assets you should have to get a trust?
yeah, there isn't really a minimum. It's really a matter of if you own a piece of property or 2 pieces of property. And the whole issue of the trust is that let's say you're a couple, and when the last person dies, all of your assets, if you do not have a trust that are not in retirement, if your assets are the ones that aren't in retirement, your house, your cars, etc., if they're not in a trust, it goes to probate. So a lot of people like getting a trust for their family because it's just easier. So they create a trust, put all their assets in the trust. It's a titling issue, right? It's not like So you make a trust, John and, and Judy Smith, revocable trust. And then, you put your house in the trust, you put your accounts in the trust. And then if anything, when the last of you passes away, your heirs have everything flow right through the trust to them. If you do not have a trust, your property and everything else goes to probate. And you have to file the death certificate with the state, and they assign you an attorney. And then you work through that attorney to disseminate the assets according to the will.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so it's a little complicated, but I think the reason why so many people, especially if you've got children and property and all that sort of thing, go toward a trust is that when the last person dies, going through probate's a nightmare. I mean, it's just more long and drawn out. You have to go through the attorney, and then you don't know if you're going to like the attorney you're signed an attorney. You don't even know who they are. So, so people often get the trust just to protect their family, and, it just flows right through to the kids, whoever your heirs are.
So the will is different from the trust.
Well, you have to have a will too, but you also have to have the will, because the will is necessary for, to have as part of all your documents. But if you don't have a trust and then you absolutely have to have the will, because the trust tells people what to do about your assets, but the will and testament is also your final wishes. So the will tends to be a little bit more detailed on little things, but the trust tells the financial advisors and everybody else what to do once, who that goes to and all that sort of thing. Yeah. And it's just a legal document that protects your assets from probate.
Okay, excellent.
You also can protect it from creditors. So
yes,
yeah. So it also have other protections. But yeah, if you have a lot of money, we definitely recommend trust. You don't have to have a lot of money, but
We have a question. I'm a recent widow and am the beneficiary of my husband's IRA. I'm concerned about your statement that it has to be taken within 10 years or turn it into a Roth IRA. No one has brought this up to me. I'm concerned about what to do now.
Okay, so with a spouse, it goes right to your IRA. So there's no issue with a spouse. It's only on if you inherited well, I should have made that clear. I'm sorry for that confusion. If you inherit an IRA from a mother, a sister, a brother, or whatever, that's an inherited IRA. From a spouse, it can be transferred just right into your IRA. Yeah, she would not need to worry about that. Yeah, it's just now her beneficiaries are the ones that are going to need to take it over 10 years. If she doesn't use it before she passes away.
Okay. How do you broach the subject with a spouse or loved one about creating an estate plan, especially when they may think they are immortal or death is not imminent?
Yeah, I know it gets back to the idea of this whole thing of partnership and taking care of other. And I guess I think I would come at it from that perspective. If I were sitting with a couple who, let's say the woman dragged her husband there because he didn't really want to be there anyway, which is, happens. And I think the thing is that you have to, sort of convince the person that it's the kindest thing you can do for your spouse, is to make sure that, of course, we know we're not immortal. We all know that. And there's going to be an end time. And I know this is a difficult subject. I know for a lot of clients, they're saying, oh, I had even to think about this. And I always say it, but it's the best gift you can give your child or your spouse. It is a gift, and so this is why, because otherwise she's devastated, and so are the kids. So that's why your advisors are so important. Your advisors will stay on this process with you to make sure, I've been saying every annual review to this one young client, they have 2 kids now. Have you gotten that will? Have you gotten that will? I'm going to email you every week until you tell me you've got that will. So, you have to have good advisors to stay on this with you, because it is important. It's really important for the family.
Yes. Life insurance, as we are in our early 60s, 4 out of 5 children independent, we need to revisit our policy. Any suggestions, levels to look at?
Yeah, so in general, we recommend 7 to 10 times your earning is what you should have in life insurance. So if, especially for a young couple, right? So you've got kids, you've got tuition. So if you were to run those numbers out over 20 years and while that spouse maybe wouldn't work while she's trying to raise or he's trying to raise the kids alone. So 7 to 10 times so of your earnings. When you get into your 60s, what it really depends on is how much debt do you have? If you were to pass away, let's say you're 62 and you have outside the mortgage, let's say you have $500,000 in debts from college, and everything else. Well, then, you'd want to have life insurance for your spouse to cover that because maybe they could cover the mortgage on their own salary. So a lot of that depends on what your assets and your debts look like. And it is nice to have, my dad passed away at 89. He bought a $10,000 policy when he was a CV in World War II. And they gave all the soldiers, $10,000 whole life policy. I think it was paid up at 10. And anyway, it was $100,000 when he died at 90 or 89. And it was just a nice thing to be able to, that little bit extra, because we didn't know how long my mom would live, so it is nice to have a little insurance. I mean, you don't have to have tons of it, but if your debts are all paid and all of that, but it is nice to have, or you might need it for your estate too. Of course, that have to be factored in, but I don't know if that answers it, but it's, in general, it depends on your situation.
Sure. Can you explain spousal IRAs for non-working spouses?
Yeah, so if your husband or your wife is the one that's working and you're not, you can still contribute annually to an IRA, and we highly recommend that. We do that in our financial plans. We make sure that if she's not working, that she still gets her $6,000 or $7,000 put away every year, so that she can also have her IRA. So definitely you can do that.
Great. Okay, and the last question we have is, we have a will. Do we need also a trust? So it's kind of my question, just in reverse.
Yeah. So again, that would depend on how much do you have outside of retirement? Do you own property? The issue again is not when the first spouse passes away. When the first spouse passes away, everything goes to the spouse. When the second spouse passes away is when that trust kicks in. So, a lot of people get that trust ahead of time so that you never know. I mean, the good Lord could take you both at the same time, so you'd be, it's good to have then everything in trust for the children, or for your heirs. So you don't have to have a trust, but in that case, it would depend on, again, what your assets look like, and what your wishes are, basically.
Kim, this was fabulous. I learned a lot, a lot.
That's a lot of information.
Well, it's a lot of information, but it's so important.
Yeah,
I mean, when this is one of those areas when we talk about growth in our 60s, I mean, managing our finances is professional growth.
Yeah, absolutely.
As individuals, we have to do it. So,
yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
Well, and also, I think that the point too is that a lot of people, we have daughters and sons, and it's if I had known then what I know now, things could be so much different. So we can be getting educated, or we can help educate our kids early on. And we launched a couple of years ago. Carol launched a program for millennials, and it's been really interesting to see the growth of that and to see their growth. And then we also launched a program where our clients that are older want to bring their kids into the process. So we're having joint meetings with their children, not necessarily to tell them what their numbers look like, but to sort of meet us and say, this is who we've been dealing with, and if the kids have any questions. So that way, again, there's this cohesiveness in the family. There isn't just this, where the kids don't know anything. Again, you're keeping this so that the whole family's together. One question I didn't answer or didn't mention that I wanted to say was that more and more people are hiring the trust company. Now, the LPL, for example, has a trust company you can put in your will instead of having your kid be an executor, or your daughter, your son, or somebody. If there are issues in a family and you have you know, things that just are difficult within the family amongst siblings, then you might consider a trust company disseminating your estate. They take about 1%. They do all the work, and then there's none of the hassle of infighting with the children, because the trust company has to follow what the trust says. And so more and more people are going to that, because you have blended families, you have, you know, there can be issues, you know, that come up with that. So that's something that we're seeing more and more of. And I meant to mention that earlier, but anyway, sorry about that. So,
That's interesting.
yeah.
Well, we had a couple more come in and ask, please take these questions.
Oh,
My husband and I created our trust at the beginning of COVID. Out of curiosity, did more people do this as a result of the crisis?
yeah, I mean, I have never been busier in this last 6 months than it's been crazy busy. Not just because, you know, people needed a high touch, you know, during this kind of crazy when the markets plummeted and all that, but also doing financial plans. People that have put off doing financial plans are suddenly saying, you know, I need a plan, I need to know what I'm going to do, how am I going to get there, and all that kind of stuff. So we've seen a lot more financial planning and estate planning definitely in the last 6 months for sure.
Yes. Okay, last question, Kim. Is it bad to die with a mortgage balance?
Not if your house is not underwater. So, so for example, if you own $1 million house and you have a $200,000 mortgage, your state still gets 800,000. So if you have a $1 million house and you have a $1.2 million mortgage, yeah, that's kind of hard on the estate. So I would say, but if you've got assets that are, you know, that are worth something, I would not know. I don't think that's bad.
That's great. Kim, thank you so much. This was just a wonderful evening. I look forward to talking to you more in the future about this. I didn't think it would be so fascinating, but it really makes you want to get it all together and just do it right, because who wants to leave a mess for your heirs?
Exactly. Absolutely. And anybody can email me at that email address we give you, you know, Kara and I, and we'll get back to you with your questions.
That's great. Thank you. Thanks to you and Kara. Wonderful. And
Okay.
thanks to Mary Ellen and Amy DeSalvo for all of their great work putting this program together for us this evening.
You gotta love those millennials, don't you? Just love those millennials. Whatever can you
Especially
do without
these
those
two.
millennials?
Thanks, Kim.
All right. Thank you. Thanks very much. Mary Ellen, over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us here tonight. We will send an email tomorrow with a follow-up survey, and then also with Kim's email along with her daughter Kara's email if you have any further questions for them. So I bid you good night. Thank you again, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.